Good afternoon. If you're just joining us, we'll wait a minute for more to log in. And hopefully everyone got some sleep this morning. I know I got to sleep around 2:30 in the morning. It was one very interesting night, and it's an interesting day. And so there's a lot to talk about today. We'll talk about local races. We'll talk about the national races, and go from here. But so, good afternoon. I'm Steve Mazikane. This is the Steve Mazikane podcast. I thank you for joining me. It has been a wild week. It's been a wild, really, week and a half. I think from that final debate to election day was pretty much amazing. It was amazing to watch. As a political junkie, it was pretty impressive to watch. And so, and we're still watching now. Let me just see CNBC. I usually go watch the market and also the updates on CNBC. I like CNBC more than MSNBC or Fox or any of those, because at least I know what the agenda is and I know it's about financial issues and making money. But a lot of things to take away from what we've seen so far. Granted, we have no president right now. Good afternoon, Elizabeth. Thanks for saying hi. We have no idea who's going to win yet. It's certainly leaning towards Biden. Wisconsin has been called for Biden, so that's significant, although Trump has already filed a lawsuit on that. Michigan is the next one that looks like it's leaning Biden, but it's very close. In this case, I will look at Politico. Politico's map has right now Wisconsin called, Michigan leaning blue, Nevada leaning blue. We look at three states that we kind of said Trump needed to win, and Florida, North Carolina looks like he's going to win North Carolina. In Pennsylvania, he's ahead in without absentees. He may win all three of those and still lose the race. And so the interesting, it's a fascinating race, but I don't know that anybody's going to walk out of this. Yes, either Biden or Trump will have the White House. But Democrats who are hoping for this repudiation of Trump, to just crush him, that didn't happen. And no matter what the final electoral numbers are, that didn't happen. Even worse, with demographics that the Democrats either they believed or their brand had believed or pushed, the minorities flocking to Democrats kind of reversed a little bit here. What Trump had increased numbers with Latinos, increased numbers with Black men, increased numbers with a lot of the minority aspects and minority parties that are very quickly not becoming minorities in the country, taking up most of the country. So, Trump lost some support with older white people. But that's usually a group that has no problem voting Republican. So there's a lot of red flags in this entire outcome for Democrats. And you can be forgiven if you're a Democrat that was looking for this massive, we're taking the White House or we're taking the Senate, and we're going to make something happen. That whole conversation about stacking the Supreme Court seems so stupid right now, because they came, they would have needed a significant lead in the Senate. They're not getting that. So you could be forgiven if you wake up this morning as a Democrat thinking you had massive momentum, you had this happening, and this will be a win if Biden wins, but it'll be significantly muted based on how successful Trump was. And at the end of the day, yes, Biden will get more votes. He will have more votes than Obama did. It looks like from a popular vote standpoint, kind of irrelevant, because he's going to run it up in California and New York and those types of states. And this really was an election about 6 states. It wasn't really an election about Connecticut. And so what we saw here was, I hate to say this, but if you had watched this podcast for the last month, you knew exactly what was going to happen, and what we kind of predicted happened. Democrats swept the shoreline. We had no question on the Comey race. I'll tell you interesting about the Comey race last night. So as soon as, if you watched this show yesterday at 4:00, we kind of said that race was over, because once we saw the absentee numbers, and that's really the story of this election, the absentee numbers, the spectacular, the huge number of people that voted absentee. As we said, over half of the registered Democrats in Branford had voted before Election Day. And, just from a numbers standpoint, from an analysis standpoint, if you are looking at the Democratic Party and saying 95 to 97% of those people are voting for Comey, Biden and then Comey, and that's kind of what happened, how do you get past? How do you make that difference up? And what also surprising in the absentee numbers was how many unaffiliated voters had already voted and how few Republicans voted. Republicans put no emphasis on early voting. That doesn't mean, we had a higher turnout. About 1,500 more people voted in Brantford, but the margins were about the same. I think we posted this earlier. And I'll look this up. Well, let's just take a look. I'll open up the screen on overall ballots last night. Biden, let's see, 58.9% of the vote. Hillary, I believe, got about 54, 55. So Biden significantly outperformed Hillary Clinton. Trump did not reach 40%, just under 40% in the overall turnout. The absentees were spectacular. The absentees in the presidential race in Brantford, 5366 for Biden, 1410 for Trump. That early vote crushed it. Just crushed it. And it's hard to even put. There's some interesting things here. For example, Biden got 5,366 votes on the Democratic line. DeLauro got 4,883 on the Democratic line and then 101 on the Working Families line. So about 450 people voted for Biden and then not Rosa DeLauro. That's interesting. We actually see there were people who voted for Biden and then Stryker. It's a very small number, a few hundred, but there were some. I'm guessing that some of those people, rebelling against that Columbus Day statue aspect. As we got to the Cohen race, that was over before it began. That the district, the 12th Senate district, is Guilford and Brantford. If you're a Democrat and you can run up your numbers in Guilford and Brantford, the other Killingworth, North Brantford are not going to make up the difference. And that's what happened there. In order to win that district as a Republican, you probably need a well-known Republican from Brantford or Guilford to run. And I just don't see that happening right now. Cohen, I think, was actually nervous. I didn't see a reason to be, but her overall total in Brantford, just crushed Laporta. 76.9% of the vote in absentees for Cohen. That's a spectacular turnout for Democrats. And it showed even unaffiliated early on, we're going Biden. We go down to the Comey race. This was, again, over before it began. Absentees, Comey had 404 and 112 on the Working Families Party, so about 4,100. Riccio, about 1,300, almost 1,400 votes. Just too big of a margin to make up. And Comey, took care of business there. And Scanlon was unopposed. So turnout was not spectacular. It was a little higher than last time, but not spectacular by any means. So, a lot of things to look at from the standpoint of we expected this huge turnout. We didn't really see that. We saw a presidential turnout, a little bit higher, but a presidential turnout. Nationally, obviously, there's much bigger numbers. I think people realized Democrats were going to sweep. They swept early in with the absentee ballots, and it was over. So it was a pretty predictable night. It was actually a unique night because every election night I go to either the Democratic headquarters or Republican headquarters. And usually there's 100 people there and they're coming in with results and there's, they have food and it's catered and it's all this stuff. Last night I went to Comey. It was me, Robin Comey, her campaign manager, and 2 or 3 other people. And that's just such a drastically different feel to this race and to this election season. And then we all went home and obviously watched the presidential. Right now, Biden is speaking. Now, I don't want to encourage people not to watch the podcast, but Biden is speaking. I'm going to put this on for a second.
And even in the face of the pandemic, more Americans voted this election than ever before in American history. Over 150 million people.
That's unbelievable.
Cast their votes.
150 million.
I think that's just extraordinary. And if we had any doubts, we shouldn't have any longer. But a government of, by, and for the people is very much alive in America. Here, the people rule. Power can't be taken or asserted.
All right, I don't expect anything of significant substance to be said while we're waiting for results from election to come. So if I see something come across the bottom, I'll let you know. But The fact of the matter is the turnout nationally was spectacular. If you're for democracy, you're happy about that. But it wasn't the results that Democrats were looking for. They're going to get a win, but they were hoping to sweep the Senate. They were the one thing they've always run on is they're the party of inclusion and they have the minorities, and that didn't happen this time. We saw Trump make significant leaps in some of those demographics in Florida. Wasn't close. We thought that would be a nail biter. That was not the problem. So looking at it now, the problem when you're looking at politics, when you're looking at these, is you say, how many opportunities does a president or a candidate have to win? And right now, with Wisconsin called, Biden is right there. Trump needs nothing else to go wrong. He needs to win Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and he's already won Florida. So it's asking a lot. It's highly probable Biden's our next president, but it's not impossible, and it can still happen. The problem that we saw with even the local race last night. So last night on the Comey race, we're getting emails about 10:15 after 8. So we had posted that Comey won. I could have posted Comey won a week ago, but pretty quickly afterwards, it was like, all right, the absentees are crazy. But apparently the Republicans didn't have the absentees initially. And so they were looking at the numbers, and the day of numbers were very good for Mark Riccio. He was winning districts. And so I'm getting, questions on, could Riccio pull this out? And I'm saying to myself, what are you talking about? Like, how is this even a question? My phone is lighting up and saying, can this happen? Are the numbers right? What's going on? And I'm saying, guys, I don't know what you're looking at, but my screen is showing a massive blowout here. What planet? Without looking at the absentees, it looked like Riccio had done something. No, he got crushed. And he ended up with about 42.5% of the vote in that ballpark. Let me double check that before I say it, which is pretty much what Republicans have gotten in that seat every presidential year. If you're a Republican in Brantford, unless you're, the Jamie Cosgrove kind of, where you're just kind of known, but I don't see him running for this stuff anyway. But in general, if you're a Republican, you're going to have to win in a non-presidential year and then hope to be the incumbent in a presidential year and have built up your base enough to do it. The final numbers on that race, Comey 4116, Riccio 13. No, that's not right. Comey 7743, Riccio 5676. So about just over 2,000 votes, 57 to 42, a 15-point win. That's a significant win. That's it's pretty much what I think Cosgrove won his last time out. I might have been a little higher for Cosgrove. In any event, nothing here was a surprise. We've talked about this many times. So the question now becomes, what happens nationally? And what Biden just quoted, it's clear we've won enough states to win. I'm surprised he said that, unless Michigan is saying it's over. I'm going to go to Biden here for a second, guys. Oh, he's just giving a political speech. Okay, so never mind. We don't need a rah-rah. I was looking for actual meat, but whatever. If Michigan's been called, we're clearly going to have a bunch of lawsuits. We'll be sitting on that for a while. But I think with all the attention on our voting, with all the attention on fake voting and the allegations of whatever malfeasance in voting, I think you're going to see most of these things be very accurate, and most of the polling places be dead on, very conscious of any particular criticism they would have had otherwise. So I asked a question on Facebook before going live today. And considering, how Trump did, and he may lose, but he lost in a way where he was gaining in demographics that was shocking. And as much as we had a massive turnout, this was not a blowout. So he got a ton of new voters too, which was people didn't expect. The question was, would people who didn't vote for Trump last time vote for him this time? The answer was yes. Some did. If you're Trump, and clearly he won't go away, right? He's going to be in the limelight. He's going to be all over the place. He'll be all over Twitter. He'll be all over TV shows, what have you, for the next 4 years. If you're Trump, do you run again in 4 years? Because what didn't happen here, if the Democratic dream had happened, where Trump was crushed, like Biden got 390 electoral votes, and the Senate was in Democratic hands by 2 or 3 seats, just a clear get out of town Trump thing, then the Republicans would have had to do some self-reflection, right? The Republicans would have had to turn around and say, wait a minute, we need to rethink this, and then run a Romney in 4 years, like the old, safe, logical Republicans. But that didn't happen. Trump didn't get he may not win, but he didn't get the repudiation. The Republicans didn't get the repudiation the Democrats were hoping for in supporting Trump. And Mitch McConnell may still end up being the head of the Republicans in the Senate and having control of that Senate. But nothing may get done. Do you run if you're Trump in 4 years? Politically, I think he does. And if you're a real candidate, if you're a Romney, in 4 years, do you run against Trump? It's a spectacular question. What we'll do is we'll raise that up again tomorrow and give some people a night to think about it. If Trump would run in 4 years, what would the results be? And should he run again in 4 years? Now we have to ask ourselves another simple question. What does this mean? We've talked about a stimulus package. The country needs it from a PPP standpoint, from money for testing standpoint, for tracing standpoint. Also in those PPP packages would be money for unemployment. With Mitch McConnell still having the Senate, the perfect scenario for a stimulus was Biden and Democrats have both sides. You probably have a $3 or $4 trillion stimulus, and it could be a massive boost to the stock market. Last week, the market tanked. The last couple of days, thinking Biden's winning, it looked like the market was going way up, expecting some sort of stimulus. So the markets right now are balancing two different things. One, they want a stimulus. Two, they don't want the tax rates to go up. So that's the balancing act for the markets with Biden. What do? Do we, hope to get a stimulus, but realize taxes are going to go up? If you have Mitch McConnell in the Senate, everything could be blocked. Everything. Nothing can get done. So you might be in the exact same position now in 4 years than we were now. And in 4 years from now, if Biden, let's suppose something happens to him health-wise where he doesn't make it through 4 years, and Trump turns around and runs in 4 years, I think Trump could be president again. He has shown far more support than even I thought he had in the country. And so it's going to be a spectacular 4 years, a spectacular week or two, but I don't think some of the lawsuits will be dismissed. I mean, one of the claims in Michigan was they weren't given access to witness some of the opening of some of the ballots. That's not going to go very far. These lower court judges are not going to let that go very far. Trump announced he won. That was nonsense. Trump also said he was going to appeal to the Supreme Court. There's no real path to do that. So there's a bunch of stuff he's saying that we just have to get rid of. It's just his bluster. But overall, it's a kind of a spectacular day. Because if you're looking for some sort of definity, some sort of, okay, we had the 4 years of Trump. Did the country support that? Or did the country just not want it anymore? We don't really have an answer. He got more votes than he did 4 years ago. He picked up votes in minorities that are supposed to be Democratic votes. The base he had last time, where he had a lot of white women, he lost some of those. It's just an amazing thing to study and look at. And a postmortem on this race is going to happen for 2 or 3 months. There's just no way to fully gather everything that happened. On a local level, the question becomes with now bigger majorities in the House, bigger majorities in the Senate, do the Democrats start pushing the agenda that many Republicans were afraid of on a statewide level? Do they push tolls? Do they push, I'm hoping for sports betting, I'm hoping for medical marijuana, but can you now have enough Democrats? There's some Democrats not for it, inner city Democrats may not be for it. Are there enough otherwise to get these things through and start taxing and bringing in tax revenue for those items? That's what we have to see, and we won't see that until next session. But they now have the ability to come up with an even further left agenda. Does that mean the schools are redistricting? No. That was a nonsense claim by Republicans. Branford's not combining with Guilford, or Branford's not combining with East Haven. None of that's happening. We're likely going to revisit the police bill. There'll be some changes to that. Whether they be satisfactory to the police departments, I have no idea. But in general, it was an interesting night. And I'd be curious to know what you thought of the night. And I know most people from a local level, the results were in so quickly that it wasn't much to talk about. We went live last night with the expectation we'd be live for an hour and a half, like we were in past years, and there was no need to be. There was just like the absentees changed the game. And it'll also be interesting to see what the status is with those going forward. Were they absentees just because of COVID? Were they absentees because we're changing how we vote? And so let's go back to how that impacts this race. If Trump loses, why did Trump lose? He got more votes. Why did he lose? And I will maintain this, that first debate, combined with early voting, cost Trump the election. You know, Trump against Clinton that last 2 weeks made up a ton of ground. He had all the momentum in the world. And he did the same thing this time. That final debate he had, he looked, by his low standard, more presidential. And you saw the polls tighten and tighten and tighten and tighten and tighten to election day. He did that 4 years ago. He did that this year. But this year, you had many people already voting the day after that first debacle of a debate. So if someone was on the fence and they watched that, as many of us did in anger, I mean, many Republicans and Democrats all over social media were like, what the hell was that? If you got up the next day and said, I'm done with Trump and were unaffiliated voter and just signed your name to Biden and done, now you're done. There's no chance to change your mind by seeing the next debate and seeing the momentum and seeing the rallies and all those things. So what early voting did, what the impact of COVID was, people got their absentee ballots early, including a lot of unaffiliated. Democrats were pushing it, but a lot of unaffiliated, likely seniors who didn't want to go out to vote during COVID. They want to be in crowds during COVID. Seniors were his biggest block, Trump's biggest block. Watched that performance, said, I'm done. That's too much. Wrote Biden on there, wrote the party line, and sent it in. So when Trump had all this momentum late, and it looks like the momentum may deliver him Florida, may deliver him Georgia, may deliver him Pennsylvania, deliver him North Carolina. Had he not had that debacle, had those people not been in such a hurry to send their ballots in, they could have seen a better performance and said, all right, he looked, even for a short amount of time, presidential. But you ran out of time. And the biggest difference between 4 years ago, close race, and this year, close race, is that people were voting early, and the ability for Trump to convince people to change their mind or get those votes back was gone for a large percentage of the population. A performance like that, let's hope we never see again in a debate. That debate should be shown in every political science class ever, because it was a disaster. Even by Trump standards, it was a disaster. And I saw the biggest Trump supporters saying, I don't know what the hell that was. So it was an amazing election season. It's not over yet, but it feels anticlimactic. It doesn't feel like there's a change. It doesn't feel like anybody actually lost or anybody actually won. It just feels like maybe we're just dead. Maybe it's just 2020 between COVID and all the other crap going on that we're just, ugh. Maybe because there's no real energy behind Biden. Yay, Biden won. There's nothing to be excited about because the people weren't running for Biden to win. They were running to get Trump out. And you got Trump out, but you didn't give him the, you're done, get out of here, we don't want to see you again look. The worst thing for Trump now is his personal legal issues. Let's not be shocked if he's on a ballot again in 4 years. Because nothing that we saw yesterday and in this election season and in the results equals a repudiation of Trump that the Democrats were hoping for. And God knows he's not going away. Okay, so that'll wrap us up for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll have an answer on the presidential race, and we'll start talking about some local stuff. I know we want to talk about development. I got some questions in on development in Brantford. Some new things happening at Exit 53. We want to talk about that. We're going to go a little bit more local tomorrow, based on unless some major happens, on a national level. But as always, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. We'll see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, guys.